The front door creaked open with a sound that didn't belong. He froze. It wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling. A quiet house has a rhythm, a silence you grow used to, especially when life has already taken too much from you. But this silence was different. It was disturbed. Alive. His grip tightened around the worn handle of his grocery bag as his tired eyes scanned the dim hallway, his heart beginning to pound in a slow, uneasy rhythm. Someone was inside. For a split second, his mind raced through everything that could go wrong. He thought of his daughter's small shoes near the corner, her drawings taped to the wall, the fragile little world he had built after everything had fallen apart. He took a cautious step forward, every nerve alert, every breath heavy. And then he saw her. Not a stranger, not a thief. His CEO, standing in his living room, quietly cleaning. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles life sometimes sends when we least expect them, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even in our darkest moments, something beautiful can still find its way in. He didn't move. Couldn't. She was kneeling beside his old, faded couch, carefully folding a blanket that had long since lost its color. Her sleeves were rolled up, her expensive watch set aside on the table, and her hair, always perfectly styled at the office, was loosely tied back, strands falling gently across her face. She looked human, not the intimidating, sharp, untouchable woman everyone feared in the office. Not the powerful CEO who barely acknowledged anyone below her level. Just a woman, quietly putting his broken home back together piece by piece, his breath caught in his throat. For months, his life had been nothing but survival. Ever since his wife passed away, the world had shrunk into a narrow tunnel of responsibilities and exhaustion. Mornings started before sunrise, preparing his daughter for school, rushing to work, enduring long hours under pressure, then coming home to cook, clean, and somehow still be present for the one person who needed him the most. There were nights he didn't sleep, nights he sat on the edge of his bed, staring into nothing, wondering how much longer he could keep going. But he did, because she needed him. His little girl, who still asked when her mother was coming back, who still left half her dinner uneaten because Mama would have made it better, who still held onto his hand just a little tighter when they crossed the street. He had learned to hide his pain behind tired smiles, but standing there now, watching his CEO, of all people, clean his house like it mattered, like he mattered, something inside him began to crack. He stepped forward slowly, his shoes brushing softly against the floor. She looked up. For a brief moment there was surprise in her eyes. Then, something softer. Not embarrassment, not defensiveness, understanding. She stood up gently, wiping her hands on a small cloth, her gaze steady but kind. And in that silence, in that fragile space between them, the weight of unspoken truths filled the room. He didn't ask the obvious question, "Why are you here?" Because somehow, he already knew it wasn't something simple. It had started weeks ago. At the office, he had always been invisible, just another employee trying to stay afloat. He did his work quietly, never complained, never asked for help. Even when the workload doubled, even when deadlines became impossible, he kept going. He had no choice. Missing work meant losing income. Losing income meant losing stability. And he couldn't afford that, not with a child depending on him. But exhaustion has a way of revealing itself no matter how hard you try to hide it. One afternoon during a routine meeting, his vision blurred. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He tried to focus, tried to stay present, but his body gave in before his mind could. He collapsed. It wasn't dramatic. No loud crash, no chaos. Just a quiet fall. And in that moment, for the first time, people noticed him. When he opened his eyes again, he was in a chair, water in his hand, concerned faces around him. And among them, her, the CEO. She didn't speak much that day, just watched, observed. There was something in her expression that he couldn't quite understand. Not pity, not judgment, recognition. Over the next few days, small things began to change. His workload eased slightly. Someone offered to help without being asked. He found himself being called into her office, not for discipline, not for mistakes, but for quiet conversations. She asked about his daughter, about his life. At first, he was guarded. Years of hardship had taught him not to trust sudden kindness. But there was something different about her approach. She didn't push, she didn't pry, she simply listened, and slowly, piece by piece, his story unfolded. He spoke about his wife, about the hospital bills, about the sleepless nights, about the fear of failing as both a father and a provider. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried in a long time, but his voice carried the weight of everything he had been holding in, and she listened to every word. What he didn't know was that his story had reached somewhere deep inside her, a place she had buried long ago, because once, years before she became the powerful woman everyone admired, she had stood exactly where he was, broken, alone, overwhelmed. She had lost someone too. She had known what it felt like to come home to silence that echoed too loudly, to carry responsibilities that felt too heavy for one person, to smile in public while quietly falling apart in private. But unlike him, she had something he didn't: support. Someone had helped her when she couldn't help herself. And now, standing at the top, surrounded by success and recognition, she realized something that had been missing. She had forgotten what it meant to give that support back, until she met him. So she did something no one expected, something that didn't fit her image, something that couldn't be explained in a boardroom. She went to his house, not as a CEO, but as a human being. Back in the present, he finally found his voice, though it came out softer than he intended. His eyes moved around the room. The dishes were done. The floor was clean. His daughter's scattered toys were neatly arranged. Even the small crack in the picture frame had been fixed. Things he hadn't had the time or energy to handle were taken care of. And suddenly, the weight he had been carrying for so long felt just a little lighter. Not gone, but shared. He sank slowly onto the couch, his hands covering his face as emotions he had suppressed for months began to rise uncontrollably. Tears slipped through his fingers, silent, unstoppable, not tears of sadness, but something deeper: relief, gratitude, the overwhelming realization that he was no longer alone. She didn't rush to comfort him, didn't interrupt the moment. She simply sat down across from him, her presence steady, giving him the space he needed to feel everything he had been holding back. Because sometimes the greatest act of kindness isn't fixing everything, it's showing up. Time passed in that quiet room, but something had changed. A shift. A beginning. In the days that followed, life didn't magically become perfect. Challenges remained, responsibilities didn't disappear. But things were different. She arranged flexible hours for him, ensured he had the support he needed at work, and more importantly, she continued to show up. Not always physically, but in ways that mattered. A message asking if he had eaten, a small gift for his daughter, a reminder that someone cared. And slowly, he began to heal, not all at once, but enough to breathe easier, enough to smile a little more, enough to feel hope again. His daughter noticed it first. The way her father laughed more. The way he wasn't as tired all the time. The way their home felt warmer. And one evening, as she sat beside him drawing quietly, she looked up and asked something simple: "Is someone helping us?" He paused, then smiled. "Yes," he whispered, "someone is." And for the first time in a long time, that truth didn't feel fragile. It felt real. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. And before we reach the end, I have a special request for you. Comment the word hope if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. Because stories like this aren't just stories. They happen, quietly, gently, without recognition. But they matter. Back in that small home, as evening light filtered through the window, he stood in the kitchen, preparing dinner while his daughter hummed softly nearby. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. And somewhere, not too far away, a woman who had once been lost in her own success finally understood what it truly meant to make a difference, not through power, not through wealth, but through compassion. And that realization changed both their lives forever. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, don't just scroll away. Engage with it, share it. Because sometimes, the right story at the right time can remind someone that they're not alone. And that might be exactly what they need to keep going.